Well, the Western media continues to ignore the genocide that's been unfolding in Donetsk, Donbass region over the last 9 years. And over the weekend, NATO and Ukraine bombarded residential areas using U.S.-made HIMARS weapons. Once again, this is a common occurrence that is almost happening daily. They hit a science institute, among other residential buildings. Patrick Lancaster has been covering this genocide for the past 9 years. He was there the moment NATO and Ukraine started launching these attacks. Take a look.
Right now, we just arrived on this shelling attack. There's incoming right now. We're at Donetsk, and there's heavy incoming shelling right now. We're on the scene. Whoa, shit.
Independent journalist and war correspondent Patrick Lancaster joins us now from Donetsk. Patrick, thank you so much for joining us. You know, we featured your work on our show for many years here, but it's great to finally have you here on the show, and thank you for your amazing journalism.
Thank you very much, Clayton, for having me. It's an honor to be here. I've watched you guys a lot, and you guys are doing great things for the push of what the mainstream media is ignoring.
So over the weekend, of course, we just played this footage, again, another round of attacks. This is a daily occurrence. And of course, the reports have been that after the fall of Bakhmut, that attention would drive towards this area, to the area that you're currently in Donetsk. What are you seeing on the street? What are you seeing in terms of attacks? And what are you hearing among the people as you go door to door and see how they're living their lives?
Well, of course, the attacks, as always, are just horrible on the civilians. If we could talk all day about the different attacks that happen every day in Donetsk. Maybe not every day on the center, but every single day in the city of Donetsk, there are attacks on the civilian population by Ukraine. I do my best to cover as many as I can, but of course I can't get to all of them. But if we talk about this particular case that you just showed, to give a little bit more in depth on it, I had actually just returned back from the front line. I was just 60 meters from Ukrainian positions and spent a night there and returned back to Donetsk. And I was shocked to see how much more intense the war was in the center of Donetsk than it actually was on the front line. And I had just been back in Donetsk for 20 minutes and heard a few explosions, got as much information as I could on the location, raced to the site, which was, as you said, the Science Research Institute that had took a direct hit from the HIMARS to the roof, which instantly killed a woman. But I arrived on the scene about 25 minutes after the initial attack, and this is what Ukraine did. They made one attack with 3 HIMARS, waited about 25 minutes until the first responders came to the scene, journalists and first responders, and then, as seen in my footage, I counted about 6, I guess, additional HIMARS that came down right almost in the same spot, right after the fire department, emergency workers, and journalists showed up on the scene, which is a clear violation of the Geneva Convention, waiting to and firing on first responders. But this is what we see from Ukraine on a daily basis, just the hammering of civilian areas in Donetsk and other areas across the regions that Russia is in control of. And it's just horrible to see on a daily basis.
You're there. Do you see? So the big question from a lot of folks in the independent media is like, well, where is Russia in this right now? Obviously, this is Russian territory now. The people voted to become part of Russia. Russia sees this as Russia. Maybe the Western NATO doesn't see this as part of Russia, but nevertheless, it is. And so, where is Russia in this? Where are the Russian forces? We see in your videos here, Russian military inspectors are inspecting the crash site where these HIMARS. But where are the forces to propel those attacks against the people of Donetsk?
Well, the main problem with the attacks on Donetsk is Avdiivka and the Ukrainian-controlled territory in the area of Avdiivka. And the fact is that these HIMARS rocket launchers are mobile launchers, just like the Oregon Smerch Soviet-made rocket launcher. They're all mobile. So a lot of people think, why doesn't Russia just knock out these launch sites? Well, that's because they'll come out of the woods somewhere, drive to a field, fire, and then within a minute and a half, they're already gone in a new position. So it's a game of cat and mouse. And as we know, Russia is pushing, as we saw. Wagner took Bakhmut, and that is to kind of go back to your other question. There is definitely an increase in attacks after Bakhmut was taken control of by Wagner forces, and in Donetsk, it kind of happens every month or so for the last 15 months. For a week or two, Ukraine will just start lobbing constantly on the center of Donetsk, just knocking out dozens of civilian homes every day. And then it'll just kind of calm down and they'll move on to a different tactic. And they're just wasting all of the Western people's tax money by bombing civilians. I mean, there's no question that the tax funds in the United States and other countries are exactly funding the killing of civilians, the injuring of civilians, and the destruction of civilian properties and civilian infrastructure. There's no question about that. But as far as Russian soldiers go and the Russian forces, there's still somewhat a little bit of a separation. They are all merging as far as the Donetsk People's Republic, Lugansk People's Republic forces, and the regular Russian army. They're starting to merge. The governments are merging, but there's still a separation. Like a few days ago, I was with the internal forces, not necessarily part of the Minister of Defense of the DPR, but a kind of a different branch. And in my reports, I kind of have them explain the differences of the different branches, who's with Russia, who's merging with what kind of battalions and groups. So there's more information coming out of it. But even for the governments now, it's all a new thing for them merging together and who's where. And then you've got other third-party things like Wagner, which is a private commercial fighting company. So
right.
It's a process. Like the process when the Donetsk People's Republic made their own government in 2014. So it's in the works.
In the works. Interesting. Okay. And when you're there in Donetsk, when you were out there yesterday covering these HIMARS attacks on these civilian population areas, were you able to turn and talk with your CNN colleagues or the New York Times colleagues or the Associated Press colleagues or the Washington Post colleagues or the Reuters colleagues or the BBC colleagues who are all there, I presume, right? They're probably there covering Donetsk, this genocide that's been happening for 9 years. Are you guys all together and go to cafes afterwards and talk about it?
No. There's no Western media in Donetsk. I mean, it's very seldom to see any Western mainstream media people in Donetsk or Donbass for that matter. Occasionally, one or two will come through for a little short story, but for the most part, they're not that interested in what's really happening on this side of the line. They're be more comfortable sitting on the Polish border, reporting on what they can do from there. But as far as you mentioned, Associated Press and Reuters, they do have some freelance people that just kind of, these freelancers, I used to be one myself, where I just film what you can and sell it to the highest bidder. I stopped that when I realized my footage was being lied about by agencies like Associated Press and Reuters. And if not them directly lying about it, them just selling it to a third party and not managing and controlling that third party is actually telling the truth about it. And we can look at a classic example of this with this attack. We saw I filmed this 20. I decided to film it without turning off the camera. 21 minutes. Interviews of workers at the place saying there's no military there. Then it was Ukraine shelling, and I come across this this report from an Australian news channel, News 10 First, it's called, and they just totally blatantly lie about this attack and just try to fit the narrative that they think they should be pushing and blame this attack on Russia, which is totally idiotic and lacking of any moral or journalistic ethics.
Russia is again being accused of crimes against humanity after its latest barrage against Ukraine killed at least 3 people and destroyed a hospital.
The peace of a Donetsk neighbourhood also shattered in the same way. A Russian rocket attack sending people running for shelter.
To blame this on Russia. I mean, this is Russian-controlled territory. Of course, Ukraine is attacking this territory like they've been doing every day for the last 9 years, even before Russia came in, when it was more of a civil war. Now, and this is able to happen because of these freelancers who just sell their work to the highest bidder. And I assume this Australian news channel just bought it from Reuters or Associated Press from someone that had filmed it, that had bought it from someone that filmed it in Donetsk. Even in their little report saying it's Russia, they run by me while I'm on the ground hiding from these shells. But it's just a stereotypical lying by the Western mainstream media about the situation in Donbass, because all they want to do is hide anything that could be negative for Ukraine or even positive for the Russian people or the civilians. And they just don't want to show you the truth. They want to show you only the half of the truth that fit the Western mainstream narrative.
Well, Patrick, I'll get you out of here on this question. The people, you speak, that's one of the things you do in your reports is you speak to the people, the citizens. You go door to door and you talk to the old ladies who live in these houses and these neighborhoods, and the families that are watching their playgrounds being destroyed, the schools that are being hit, etc. What are the people in Donetsk saying now that they're part of Russia and the shelling is continuing here? What are they saying as every day this continues to happen?
Well, as the people of Donetsk, as most of the world had assumed once Russia came in, as the story was, 3 days to Kiev, and then they assumed it would all be over. When Russia fully recognized the Lugansk and Donetsk People's Republic, and then moved in officially, the people of Donetsk and Lugansk, they thought, the dying was going to stop. But not everything works out that way, as we see, but they're praying that things start to move faster as far as Russia taking more territory, because a lot of the people in Donetsk, they have family on the other side, just kilometers from the front line, that their families just waiting for Russia to get to them. And it's hard to see these people going through this and being cut away from their families for so long, because during the last 9 years, there was areas where you could cross the front line and families could see each other or even going around. But now these families are just cut apart and just praying that soon they'll get back together. And they know that to make that happen, Russia has to finish taking the rest of the Donetsk region, or what was the Donetsk People's Republic.
Heartbreaking, and the Western media just ignores this genocide and this tragedy. But someone who doesn't is Patrick Lancaster. He's an amazing journalist. We'll have links to Patrick's channel in the description below. Watch his latest reports. Follow along with Patrick. Really one of the bravest people covering this war. And so, thank you so much for your great work, Patrick. We really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you. Anytime.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.